Good afternoon. This is Lopez Cherise. As we all know, communication thus helps understand people better, removing misunderstanding and creating clarity of thoughts and expression. There are three most well-known models of communication, which is the linear, interactive, and transaction model. First, let me discuss the linear model. This model is originally developed by Shannon and Weaver in 1949. This describes model as a linear process. It is about how a sender or speaker transmit a message to the receiver or listener. Shannon, in his famous article titled A Mathematical Theory of Communication, where he outlined the theory, explained what the goal of his model was. He said that fundamental problem of communication is that of reproducing a message sent from one point, either exactly or approximately to another point. This is, according to him, that can be found in his article, which is in page 379. So this basically means that he somewhat hoped to more effectively identify those pressure points where communication is distorted. Linear model are still useful these days. A pretty simple example of his model is a message that was sent through television, radio, newspapers, and magazines. So basically, linear model is more on one-way communication. The second model is interactive model, which describes communication as a process in which participants alternate positions as senders and receiver and generate meaning by sending messages and receiving feedback within physical and psychological contexts. This is according to Scrum in 1997. This model follows to which communication and feedback flow between sender and receiver. Feedback is simply a response that a receiver gives to sender. For example, your teacher may respond to a point you raise your hand during class discussion, or you may point to that sofa when your roommate asks you where the remote control is. Simple explanation. Interactive model is more on reverse communication, like puli-puli ang pag-communicate. And lastly is the transaction model that was proposed in 1970 for basic interpersonal communication, where articulates the sending and receiving of messages happen simultaneously between people. This model is a multi-layer feedback. The message passing takes place with a constant feedback being provided from both parties. A feedback for one is the message for the other. So an example of this model is a face-to-face meeting, or a telephone call, or a meeting in which all attendees participates by sharing ideas and comments. So this basically is about continuous process of communication. Continuous siya, pero both sender or receiver interchanges in a more equal way, like they communicate equally. So now, let's compare and contrast these three models of communication. Linear and interactive model are both similar in a way that both sender carries the conversation. So the message from both model travels from sender to receiver. So both linear and transaction model has their similarities also, as the sender of these both communicates directly to the receiver. I'm so sorry for that. So interactive and transaction model, on the other hand, are two-way communication. So the linear model of communication is also different from other two models because this model is sent from one person to another. Interaction model, on the other hand, is achieved through the feedback of a sender and a receiver while in the transaction model is also a two-way of communication. So that's it. The three mode of communication is linear, interactive, and transaction mode.